and thank you for joining me on my presentation on Ishikawa Mao's The Great Ryūkyū Photographic Scroll. I hope you will enjoy my presentation. So yes, the project, the research is focusing on community activism and the chorus history and memory through reading of Ishikawa's project. Mao Ishikawa was born in 1953 in Ogimi village in the northern part of Okinawa Island, one of the most distant rural areas of Japan. When Ishikawa was born, Okinawa was still under the American military occupation forces, a status that remained in effect until her graduation from high school in 1972. Her first photo book, Hot Days in Camp Hansen, was published in 1973 and immediately became a hit, a compilation for which Ishikawa was coined Okinawa's Noun Golding for her direct and honest portrayal of Okinawa's young women and their lovers, often American GI soldiers of African-American descent. Ishikawa has always emphasized her love of people and dedication to her community. In her later project, Ishikawa moved on to use stage photography, where she was able to engage the community in her photographic process. One of these later projects is the Great Ryūkyū Photographic Scroll, a series of 30 meters long scrolls executed annually between 2015 and 2023, for which she worked with a community to set up and reenact scenes taken from Okinawa's history, as well as its present struggles. In light of Ariela Azulai's indication of the photograph as a social event, in which the photographer is only one part of a group endeavor, I reconsider Ishikawa's staged images that reconstruct scenes based on local personal memories and oral history. Members of the community contributed from their knowledge and skills in reenacting the episodes that Ishikawa had photographed. In this context, I read the community as a chorus pronouncing the polyphony of voices and calls which are associated with the particularities of Okinawa's history. Ishikawa in this stage, stage construction, functions as the conductor and the leader of the troupe. The second aspect in the scroll format calls for a reconsideration of issues of time and representation, and how the stretch of the scroll performs like a film format or a sequence of still events captured as single images in a non-linear performativity of duration in the Bergsonian sense. With my understanding of the importance and relevance of this age-long format, I analyze its potentiality to expand on the language of still photography, practices of time-based format. The scroll format is often found in Japanese as well as Chinese paintings, which are impossible to view in one glance, and need to be rolled to be able to view all its details. My interpretation is that one needs to put the element of time into the scroll. While viewing a single image, a photographic frame or a painting, we grasp the whole image in a blink. However, with a scroll, there is a process of revelation that takes time and exposes over time. Many scrolls take the advantage of this aspect, and they tell a story that occurs over time, like Seshu's landscape of 4 seasons that we saw in the previous slide. This is Seshu's 4 seasons. When we scroll and move along the scroll, and move along the physical scroll through the passage of time and seasons that takes place in the story, unraveling through the scroll. On the other hand, the scroll functions like a cinema, A scroll format guides the viewer to spend time in the process of viewing and the development of the story along the scroll's length. Isn't the fact that Ishikawa collects her images frame by frame and prints them as one long continuous scroll a possibility to insert the time factor into the images and the process of viewing those scrolls? In the scroll images, Ishikawa reenacts the scenes of annexation or political parodies of the late Abe Shinzo, or parodizes the American Osprey helicopters landing and so forth. The mishmash of times, the havoc of the sequence of elements serve as a possibility to retell history, to return to those events and reiterate them in a new manner that offers a fresh view, a new solution to what happened in the past. When Ishikawa was a high school student, she experienced the 1970 Koza uprising, a series of demonstrations against the US military rule over Okinawa. In 1971, she took part in demonstrations to oppose the Okinawa Reversion Treaty, which was designed to keep US military bases present in Okinawa. I was among many demonstrators, and I realized there was a riot police member on the ground. His body was convulsing and smoking. I immediately understood that he was killed. I realized that I could not be an activist and did not want to be in a political group. At the same time, from the bottom of my heart, I wanted to express this burning island, Okinawa. The conclusion I reached was, I must become a photographer. In 1973, a year after Okinawa's reversion to Japan, Ishikawa participated in a workshop photography school with Tomatsu Shomei, where she learned the basics of photography. Tomatsu's strong, vivid, direct style of documentary photography was a starting reference for Ishikawa, who poignantly, sharply and fearlessly directed her camera towards herself, her friends, acquaintances, neighbors, fellow city dwellers, and the American GIs. Her first publication of Hot Days in Camp Hansen was on that year when she was only 23. Ishikawa had practiced several documentary outstanding series in her starting stage, following in the footsteps of Tomatsu, her great teacher. These included the Port Town Elegy. She photographed the poor working men on Naha's port during their off-duty hours. And in Fences, she documented the obstacle presence of US bases scattered along the island of Okinawa. In the 1990s, Ishikawa moved on from documentary photojournalist style of her early project to stage projects, including performing for the camera and from black and white images to color photography. Ishikawa created her several collaborative projects, including What Japanese Flag Means to Me, in which she photographed Japanese as well as Okinawan citizens, Korean and Chinese residents in Japan, in which she had her protagonists planning their scene and the location of the photograph to be taken, and then she was there ready to click her camera. In another series, Ishikawa photographed Morika, a young woman of Okinawa whose courage and freedom of body and sexuality appealed to Ishikawa, and she photographed her. Therefore, when arriving at the Great Ryūkyū Photographic Scroll, Ishikawa came ready to work with the community on full scale. In Ishikawa's scrolls, members of the community serve in the role of the chorus, like in the Greek theater. a group telling the story, sometimes in a visual form, making the community the actual protagonists that tell the events. In the Great Ryūkyū Photographic Scroll project, the chorus tells their own stories and show the effort taken between Ishikawa and her community to tell the story of Okinawa. She's not the genius artist who walks into the community and seeks their help and collaboration, as is very popular in recent art projects of relational art, but rather Ishikawa is part of that community, and the project is a fruit of long-term encounters, dialogues, conversations, decisions, and actions taken by her community to create these scenes. Ishikawa is more of a conductor leading an orchestra than an individual artist whose project is hers alone. Or, to use Jacques Rancière's note on the process of the distribution of the sensible, the turn of the aesthetics into political, which takes place between the description in text printed on paper to the theater that activates the words in a play, to a chorus that recites the text on stage or for the camera. Thirdly, Ishikawa's position here is a complex stand between history and memory. While the professional historical point of view always demands original documents to prove an action, in the past 4 decades, this approach was challenged by the enormous respect and value given to oral history and memory. It all started with Claude Lanzmann's film Shoah of 1988, where for 9 long hours, there were only talking heads in front of the camera. No footage, no documents, no evidence. Just people tell from their memory what they have been through in Auschwitz. Lanzmann's act changed things forever. It became clearer that the document, the footage, or the evidence are not the whole story, mainly because they lie with the perpetrators who held the power and the documented evidence. A similar turn took place with the testimonies of comfort women when their personal stories started to play a central role in understanding the history of those atrocious events. The victims of atrocities only have their memories, and their ability to speak up goes beyond the shame and silencing as they present their version of the events from memory. Therefore, in recent decades, from the 1990s onwards, we see a huge shift in understanding the power and meaning of testimony or confessions alongside evidence, and how memories and testimonies serve as powerful tools to undermine the discourse of the victors. Therefore, the scrolls became a collective form of activism. The images are charged with historical as well as political meaning, turning the photographs into a recollection of events created as a series of staged memories or comments conveyed by the silent majority, the everyday citizens who are getting together to make their multiple voices heard as a chorus. Then is the question of pastiche and irony. Frederick Jameson had early on recognized that criticism often takes the form of exaggeration and ridicule. And we know that in the theater and in stand-up comedies, overdoing and putting things and images out of proportion, becoming vulgar, even abject, is key to criticism and the pastiche. The ability to parodize such events in part of what Jameson referred to as postmodern criticism. Therefore, when looking at some of the scenes of Ishikawa's scrolls, it is evident that exaggerating and acting out are all legitimate tools recruited by Ishikawa's actors, whom she documents for the scenes in the scroll. This is the product of a group of very angry people who want to scream and tell the world about their poor luck, suffering, and the injustice they face every day of their life. Two final points regarding the formal achievements of Ishikawa's photographic scrolls. Ishikawa's scrolls are 1 meter high and 30 meters long, the exact size of a printing paper roll, which means that this far she created 300 meters of images divided into 10 separate scrolls. Ishikawa follows this format. She gathered her images frame by frame and prints them on a long continuous paper as a possibility to insert a time factor into the images and the process of viewing while walking along the scroll. The mishmash of times, the havoc of the sequence of elements serve as a possibility to retell the events, to reiterate them in a new manner that possibly offers a fresh view or perhaps a new solution to what happened in the past. And the first version of Ishikawa's work was exhibited in 2014. The overbearing act of the Japanese government and the US military were escalating, and she dedicated a few frames to documenting the protesters at Nago City near the gates of Camp Schwab and the new site of Henoko, where the US military is planning to move the Futenma Air Base, which is currently located within the boundaries of Naha City and causes much noise and disturbance. This is the image that you can see behind me. To conclude, in my talk, I did not discuss specific images and memories, but a roadmap for your viewing of the scrolls. Remember their role and affect within the community and wider Japanese audience. The battle over the memory of the Battle of Okinawa and its articulation offers an example of the 2 points of view of the events within the Japanese context. The Okinawans seek to highlight and remember the events of discrimination and offense, creating paths to reconciliation and restoration of their wounds and pains, while the Japanese government chose the way of concealing the disputed facts, leaning towards smoothing over the past and building for the future. As this presentation demonstrated, Ishikawa's endeavor is a move that can shake this power structure and introduce an alternative point of view as a spark of hope. Thank you very much.